I'm Aaron Myers, and this is the Everyday Language Learner interview series. I'm excited to be joined today by Gaby Cortinas. Gaby's from Argentina, though his wife and he live in Italy, where they sing opera. Gaby is a polyglot who continues to work to learn more and more languages. Gaby, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Well, let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about your own language learning journey. Kind of when did that begin and how has that progressed through the years?
Well, I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, as you said. I was born into a complete monolingual family. My parents are the first generation to be born in Buenos Aires. My grandparents all came from Spain. So there wasn't much, I would say that there was no other language as I was growing up. I remember listening, I have a brother who's 10 years older than I am, and he used to love to listen to the Beatles and things like that. So I think I got some of the input from English. I got listening to music, basically. But, and I always had this idea for the German language, even I don't know where from. I remember watching the World Cup in, I think, soccer World Cup, it was '82, and I was rooting for the German team and things like that. You don't know where they come from. So that was basically my first, when I finished high school, I didn't know which direction to take. My brother is a mathematician, so he kind of lured me into science, and I started, I did a year of chemistry, but that wasn't my thing. And at the same time, I started taking private lessons of German in a language school. And I did about 3 years of that. And that was really exciting. It was my first foreign language, just learning a new language and sharing the same passion with other people in the same class.
Sure.
And that was, I think, I was right after high school, so I was 19 years old, and by the time I was in 3 years after that, when I was 20, 21, a friend and I went to the Grand Tour in Europe. We went a whole month and started in Madrid. It was in '92 because it was the Olympic Games in Barcelona that I wanted to see. I was always interested in sports. Basically, growing up, I did. Basically, my sports was athletics. I did hammer throwing.
Oh, wow.
I did weightlifting and things like that until when I was 22, I had a bad back injury, so I had to stop. But I was interested in sports, so I went to Olympics. My friend had some relatives living in Milan, so he wanted to see them as well. And so we did Paris and London and some of Austria, and then he went his way and I went back to Barcelona. But until that was exciting to go to Germany and be able to speak to the locals and get really to know people that in those days we didn't have the internet and we didn't have much of a confrontation like we can have nowadays. I forgot your question. Sorry. It was,
just your language learning journey. When did you begin with English?
Well, I don't know really. As I said, I think there was a lot of input growing up, natural input through music, through songs and things like that. I had, like everybody in Argentina, would have some English at school, but it wasn't something that you would really use. So when I started German, I remember I clearly remember. I think probably people that would study their first foreign language would know this. When you start first foreign language, is like your own language and the foreign language. There's no like a compartment for different languages. So by then it was Spanish or German. And when I started traveling to Europe, I had to start using more the English. And it was a really hard struggle. I remember mixing it all up, and for a while it was really, really hard. So '92, when I went back to Buenos Aires, became really interested in opera about those days. I think I remember someone saying in the German class that the Cologne Theater, which is the big opera house in Buenos Aires, one of the biggest in the world, had started putting subtitles. It's over titles because it's on top, but it's like, it would be the subtitles in the movie. So throughout the opera, you could follow in your own language what's going on.
Sure.
Me being curious about things related to culture and languages and music, I went to my first performances out of curiosity to see this thing about the subtitles and the music, and I was blown away by this. No microphones, acting, costumes, literature, all these stories. It was a Flying Dutchman by Wagner. So up to this day, Wagner is my favorite composer.
Wow.
So all these kind of Lord of the Rings myths of German medieval tradition. That was the thing with German, and after that I was studying in the Goethe Institute in Buenos Aires. I was studying German, and they have a little choir there, just singing traditional German things. And I had this friend that said, "Oh, you probably have a voice. You should try out some singing," and wanted to try the choir there. And one of those things that starts slowly growing up in you. So I did 1 year there. Then I found a opera choir that did some traditional opera choir singing, and then I started looking for a private teacher and found a private teacher. And after a couple of years of that, in '98, I decided to give it a try and see what it would be like to take a master class in Europe. So I wrote to some summer courses in Europe. There was one in particular I was interested in Salzburg, in Mozarteum. They have all this summer academy, and I wrote to them, and they wrote back, and it sounded okay. So I went there for 3 weeks, and there's where I met my wife the first time. And she was studying with a teacher from Italy here. She was taking private lessons, and after that master class, the same teacher invited me to another master class in Italy. And after that, we kind of stayed in contact, and he said, if you want to come to Italy and study with me, I'd be pleased to teach you. So I put all my things together in Argentina. I was having a normal, I was head of the computer department in a company that made cylinders for natural gas, those ones that you put in your car. So I had my normal job there. I was earning well. I was having my prospects of eventually getting an apartment and buying a car and just having a normal life. And out of the blue, I said, I'm going to try and go to Europe and study opera.
That's awesome. So it seems a little bit...
Yeah, go on.
It seems a little bit like both language learning and opera were things that you kind of stepped into a little bit later. They grew on you. It wasn't like you grew up with this intense passion as a young kid to learn languages or sing opera, but they really developed. And so,
exactly.
How about you? I know you're studying a lot of. When did you kind of get the bug to think, I'd like to learn a lot of languages?
That really wasn't too long ago. Within opera, most opera is written in Italian or German, some in French, a little bit in Russian, English. So those are basically the international languages for opera. So before I moved to Italy, I did about 3 months of Italian, but Italian is, as you know, is very close to Spanish, and the dialect that we have in Buenos Aires has a lot of influence from Italian. So I did a few months there, and coming here kind of flew easily to me. So I had studied a little bit of French, just on my own in Buenos Aires. I have done a little bit on the Alliance Française, just a certification. And that kind of was what I was needing. I mean, I wasn't needing to study all these strange languages. And You know, in a way, some friends that I had, they were only, oh, you're so good with languages, and you know, you kind of feel, well, flattered in a way, but it was okay. You know, you don't feel like I need to go and study all the other languages just for the fun of it. Um, um, when I was studying in the conservatory here, I had to sing for one of the exams some British folk songs written by Benjamin Britten, and they were written in Welsh. And my teacher said, "Well, you can sing them in English as English translation as well, but if you think you are able to find someone that will teach you Welsh, it would be perfect just for the phonetics, because it's the original language they're written on." And I happen to have a friend here coming. I go to a church here in Torino, an international church, and this person was coming to preach in this church from Wales. And like many Welsh people, he had some Welsh at school, but he wasn't fluent. He wasn't using the language, but he knew how to pronounce the words. And that's what I was needing.
Yeah.
So we sat together and we made a recording of the words, and we just figured how to pronounce it. I sang the concert, and that was it. Then it was the one sport I really like is rugby nowadays. So Argentina really has a top team in rugby international, and so does Wales. So when they came, the 2007 World Cup was in France, which is not far from here, but some games were hosted in the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff as well. So I went to see one game there, Wales and Japan, and the brother of this friend was living there in Cardiff. So we went together. We went to the stadium, and I don't know if you've ever been to Wales, but the Welsh are very passionate about rugby and about the language. And even if the Welsh people don't speak the language, they know the national anthem, of course, and it's in Welsh. So it's this fantastic 50-some, I don't know, 70,000 seat stadium, closed the roof, everybody's singing out loud, and the Welsh people are very famous for the male choirs, because they have, if you read about the history, in the late 1800s, there were lots of miners coming from the north of Wales to work in all the mines in the south to propel the Industrial Revolution in the UK and worldwide. And they worked in the mines there in Wales, and the conditions were terrible, but their spirit was always going and being sticking together, and there was all this social influx, and they were singing out and having these fantastic voices. So it was amazing. It was to hear this. My Hen Wlad is the Welsh national anthem. And so after that, I bought a Welsh course, and I came back home, with the CDs and textbook, and one thing is in Wales and with all this excitement, and one thing is sitting down with the CD and trying to figure out things. And it was like very traditional in a way. I was like, okay, I'll do it later. And then I found online, I was surfing a website called openculture.com, I think, .org, and there's a lot about things that you can find on the internet about different disciplines. And there's a section about languages, and there wasn't anything about Welsh, but there was one of the comments to that section that explained that they said, I have been learning with this website called Say Something in Welsh, and if you would like to give it a try, it's fantastic. So I just click, and I was in the forum, and it was great, because you didn't, they say, don't read, don't write, just download the lessons, MP3s for free, and put it on the iPod. Was by about those days I had bought my first MP3 player, and get them there and start speaking. And I was like, I finished lesson 1. I was speaking to my wife in Welsh, and I was completely something that is. I think I heard one time Moses McCormack talking about the wow factor. Things like Welsh and Swahili, those have a really high wow factor. And over time, that's been 3 years ago, and I've been to Wales several times and learned a lot about the culture, the history. They're passionate about arts and poetry and music, and just it's a marvel that it's a Celtic language. There's two branches of Celtic languages. Welsh is together with Cornish and Brittonic, the one in the north of France, and another branch you have the one that they speak Manish in the Isle of Man, and Scottish and Irish. But out of all those six, the one that is most alive nowadays is Welsh.
Yeah.
And being just across the street from England, that English has taken over the world. It's a miracle that is still alive, and thanks to the people that are really passionate about the language.
Yeah.
So as the people say something in Welsh, the problem that most people have, not only in Welsh but in any language, is that you don't have enough output. You have a lot of input. I think I heard Luca Lampariello mention last week in this conference in Russia. He said many people observe a language, they don't learn it. And also on your other interview with Neil Rees, he said also for the first 3 months it should be little written input as possible and lots of oral output.
Yeah.
So that's in a way that's how children learn. They don't know how to write or read. They just listen. They don't repeat. They just listen and internalize sounds and words, and then they start at some point saying phrases together.
Right.
So this is how the method works.
Yeah.
It's not you repeating, but you learning a few words, and then they mix them up together for you to create phrases in your mind and start speaking them up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that kids can, like, their very first utterances aren't just repeating something, but they're actually creating right away with what they've ingested and what they've taken in. So, as an opera singer, how do you think, have you felt like that because of your musical background, because of opera, obviously you've got that a lot of the opera's in other languages, but how has that benefited your language learning, just being in music?
Well, I think when you sing in a language, you have to be very careful on pronunciation. And I think one thing is you have to be able to recognize first the sounds in order to imitate them first. I heard a lot talking about this, and it's true. For instance, in Spanish in general, and particularly in South America, we don't have many differences of sounds. We don't have v and b, s and z. For instance, there's the Marriage of Figaro, there's a character goes Susanna, and I was singing before coming to Italy. I was singing an aria where it said Susanna something. And it's Susanna, so it's double N, and the middle S is Z, it's not S. I was saying Susana. I was like completely Spanish, like, not because I couldn't pronounce it, but because I couldn't hear the difference between the two S.
Sure.
So if you cannot make a distinction in your ear, then you cannot pronounce the sound. But as soon as you start to concentrate and you start to make the differentiation of the different sounds, then you can start to make it a difference when you sing. And the same way, I have learned whole operas in Russian, but with a Russian coach as well. But I can speak a few words in Russian, and I would like really to learn it more fluently in the future. But I think that the first thing is that you learn by singing is to make a lot of attention to open your mind to different sounds. And then try to imitate those when you speak. I think the accent is something different. I still have all the people in the streets can tell that I'm not Italian by the way the phrase flows, in a way, the accent. But I try to make each sound as it is, and try to make the differences clear. I try to make all the doubles. echo, and it's no echo, it's echo, and things like that, which we don't have in Spanish. But I try to be as close as I can to the language in that regard.
Sure, sure. Now, you're married to an American, living in Italy, and you have 2 children. How has the language learning gone for your kids? How are they doing? Are they trilingual?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are trilingual. From day one, we were told that it was best to try to focus on one language, on our language, to speak to them. So I, for years, been in Italy. Our first daughter was born in 2005, and I had moved here 6 years before that. So I don't have any family or relatives here. So apart from a couple of times a week, speaking on the phone with my parents or brother in Argentina, I wasn't using Spanish much. So it was kind of even though it's close to Italian, I was used to speak Italian or English. So it was kind of a bit of a stretch on my brain at the beginning, just first few months, to concentrate. And then you're concentrating and speaking only one language to a person that is so little that cannot respond to you. So you say, might as well speak in Chinese, but you know that the words are going there. Eh? And it's fantastic when you start hearing the output. And nowadays, Gaia is 7 and Caris is 5. They go to school here in Italy. They speak Italian to each other, especially when they come back from school. They play all in Italian. And when sometimes we go to Germany for work or to other countries, and it's good that they are together and they keep the language alive between themselves. But when they speak to us, to me it's still a bit of a mix, because Italian and Spanish are close together, but to my wife it's only English. And if I say, Gaia, go, I say something in Spanish to her, go tell mommy, ask, give me a glass of water or something, and she will go and translate, say it in English to her, what I had said in Spanish. And it's something natural. And I try to do the same with other languages. As I started talking about the language learning after the Welsh, just a couple of years ago, I started finding this polyglot community in internet and getting excited about making a point to start other languages and start from zero. Like I started with Swahili, I started with Thai recently. So when I start new languages, I try to make it a game for them. And I like to be involved in their lives, and then they are involved in my life. I don't want to lock up because I need to study Thai, so you go away and do your thing. So many times, Gaia, she's in 2nd grade, she's got lots of homework. So we sit together, and she does her homework, and I do my Thai character writing. And so afterwards, I check her math, and I say, okay, this is, so she checks my Thai, and she puts, I have a couple of times that she graded my Thai,
That's great.
So those are nice things to do.
The thing that seems really exciting about that is just that, so one, starting out, that you really had to be intentional about saying, I'm going to speak Spanish to my kids. Your wife, I'm going to speak English. But then now even you're just showing them and giving this example of the joy of learning languages and getting that, just building that within them. I think that's such an important thing, whether they learn a little bit of Thai now or not. As they grow older, they'll carry that excitement and be able to kind of make those decisions as they get older and don't have lots of schoolwork and other things to worry about as well. So anything that having kids, anything that you do that with excitement to the kids, they think, oh, that's the end of the world, it's fantastic, just I want to do more of that. And if you put the language as part of that and demystify in a way language learning, then I mentioned something, and we go sometimes to a Chinese restaurant, and we say, next year we should learn some Chinese, at least to say this and that. And, and they are just excited about that. And if they talk to other friends at school, they're going to be, you had to be, at certain age to start learning a language. All these preconcepts that parents have, and that's
that's too bad. I mean, I know many parents that do speak good English or good French around here. I thought, gee, if it was my child, I would just focus on that foreign language, knowing that the child will learn Italian because it's here, and at least not necessarily that would be an asset by itself, the language, but that would open their minds that, oh, I can do anything. I can learn a new language. I can do other things.
Yeah, that's great. As you've been learning a lot of languages, what surprised you about language learning in general? As you've learned more and more language, have you had any fun surprises that you've come to?
I think being part of all this language learning community, you see other people interested in language learning, and they share their methods, and like the book that you have, that is really fantastic for that, for different resources. I think as you see different methods and you try them out with you start to know which way you learn, whether they're more visual, whether more practical, more towards grammatic structures or not. So you kind of start to see different similarities between languages, and you start to see how you yourself learn better. And not, my wife she likes to write a lot and go step by step and start and always lesson 1. I like to start, of course, in lesson 1 and go, but I kind of need to go fast and then sometimes go back and then start moving the thing. I don't like the feeling of being stuck in one lesson until I know every word. I'm much more of a somehow natural flow of the language. Sure. And I like to use different resources. I just after I studied we said something in Welsh, I like the idea of doing a lot of output, and I think that's what generates some kind of certain fluency when you not when you repeat concepts, but when you start making your own sentences. And that's something that is kind of lacking, specifically when you go to classes and without students. Sometimes you're not challenged to speak a lot, and when you are, it's just to solve a problem or to say one phrase. But it should be using it up like children do, like any other person does. Just you learn a new concept, a new verb, and start mixing up. Okay, now use a glass of water, and then you use this book, and then you use just even if it's half an hour a day or 15 minutes, just use it up and have those sentences running around in your brain.
Yeah. No, that's really, there's that point where you just have to be able to practice and speak extemporaneously, and have to kind of just play with the language so that you can learn the language to a deeper level, to where you're kind of teasing out the nuances and experimenting and trying things and then getting some feedback. Oh, you wouldn't say it quite that way. So yeah, that's for sure. Just to kind of wrap things up here, what is one tip that you would give to a beginning language learner? Now, you started as like a 19-year-old. If you think, there's talking to a 19-year-old Italian kid on the streets who's monolingual, thinks, man, I'd really love to learn another language. What's one tip or word of advice you'd give to them?
Well, I think just listening to the polyglot community, different people, different experiences, and different interviews. I think I also agree with the fact that you have to find your own niche, the things that you like, and just be surrounded by the language and be passionate about what you're learning, and find the reason why you're learning that language, and make it everything for you. Just if you don't like this particular subject, well, just go towards this other subject and open up a spiral of different things around that, and use it up as much as you can. Nowadays with Skype, for Thai, I have a teacher in Bangkok, and we do once a week or once every 10 days, just for practicing and for having a native person. So we have all these advantages nowadays. That is, I think I completely think that it's a new age of language learning.
Yeah.
We've been in these dark ages of there was only one method. There was only going to night classes, staying in a room. Everybody had to speak out at the same time. There was no creativity, no contact with other people from other countries, from natives. If you were more lucky and lived in Europe, for instance, you probably had more interaction with other languages. Right. But in Argentina or in the United States, you don't have that much. And now we have all these resources. We have these materials for free sometimes. We have websites that you can go and buy online, and 2 days is in your door here. Yeah. Just all these resources, use them up. Just try to find, if it's not in your local community, through the polyglot community or using Skype to use the language. And as you use, you always would find what methods best suit you, and what's interesting and what keeps you motivated. And you will have this plateau sometimes that is, you're kind of stopped. You don't find motivation, so you have to reshuffle sometimes and find a new method, or find a new friend, or find an excuse to, go and buy a cheap ticket and go see a football game and get in the crowd, and I like the language now. I know something that is exciting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's really great. Well, Gaby, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and there's a lot of insight there, and it's just fun to hear from other language learners, and a lot to learn from you. So thank you.
Thank you.